Senate has taken an important and historic step today by adopting a motion to proceed on the legislation reforming our broken immigration system. I look forward to moving through this debate over the next couple of days and weeks in regular order. This bill received a thorough vetting in the Judiciary Committee over a couple of weeks. More than 100 amendments were adopted. I think more than 300 amendments were submitted. And I want to commend Chairman Leahy and Ranking Member Grassley for offering a process that makes this Senate proud. And for those who believe that the Senate can't work through regular order and that all sides can agree to amendments being offered and a debate being had, I think they'd be heartened to see this process so far and to see this bill brought to the floor with the agreement that many amendments will be offered and considered. We'll have thorough debate. Really leaves us in good stead for this legislation. This is important legislation. And I hope as we move through it, we can remember that we need and assign motives to people who are debating either side of this issue. This is an issue where passions run high. We see that among our constituents and across the country. But here in the Senate, I hope that we remember that we're all coming to this debate with different perspectives. We represent different states, but that all of us want a better immigration system. And that if we can not question each other's motives throughout this process, I think we'll all be better off. Arizona, as everyone knows, is a state that has a large population of undocumented aliens. We rest on the border, a large border with Mexico, and with all the issues and problems that presents and has over the years. A sizable undocumented population helps no one. It doesn't help those families living day to day with one family member or another out of status. It doesn't help state or local governments that bear the brunt of the cost, whether it's education or health care or criminal justice or incarceration. These are expenses that are borne more by the states than the federal government. And it leads to a lot of frustration, certainly in Arizona and elsewhere. It certainly doesn't help when businesses struggle to maintain a legal workforce. That's the case in Arizona. Up until recently, the Tucson sector of the Border Patrol was the busiest sector in the nation when it comes to illegal crossings. And while there are claims that the border is now safer than ever, landowners in the border region continue to face a reality that would suggest otherwise. Let me just give you an example. Earlier this year, the Ladd Ranch, a 14,000-acre ranch that shares 10 miles of the U.S.-Mexico border between Naco, Arizona, and the San Pedro River, witnessed 14 breaches with a total of 29 trucks just over the past 12 months. These are taking place in the daylight. Between the border and the undocumented, our current immigration system does little to ensure that our economy has the talent we need to ensure the U.S. competes globally. So when you have issues on the border and the landholders and all the problems that are attendant with that, and then you have businesses that simply can't get access to the talent that they need, you have a problem that needs to be solved. In addition, the programs oriented toward providing adequate temporary or short-term workers are typified by caps that don't work and red tape that make them all but unusable. Let's face it, our current immigration system is irreparably broken. This legislation before us takes great strides with border security. I look forward to these provisions being debated and thoroughly vetted throughout this process. I'm sure that many amendments will be offered. I plan to offer some of them myself to improve this process and to improve the border security elements of the bill. This legislation has a tough but a fair process to bring the undocumented out of the shadows. People who come forward will be required to pay fees and fines. For those who raise the term amnesty again and again, let me assure you, there is no amnesty in this legislation. Amnesty, by definition, is an unconditional pardon for a breach of law. This is no unconditional pardon. Those who come forward, come out of the shadows, those who are undocumented, will be required, as I said, to pay fines and fees. They'll be required to work. They'll be required to stay well above the poverty level. When it comes time to renew their status, they'll be required to pay any back taxes that have accrued. And again, show that they have stayed here and have maintained the status in a way that would allow them to be renewed before they're able to adjust to get a green card. 10 years into this process, there will be many other things required as well. Again, they'll need to prove that they have paid taxes, that they have not been a public charge. They will need to learn English. Right now, the requirement is that you learn English to become a citizen. This requirement under this legislation is moved up to green card status. Just to get a green card, you'll have to be proficient in English. This legislation also dramatically modernizes our legal immigration system. It ensures that U.S. businesses will have access to the best and the brightest around the world. I've been concerned about this issue for years. Years ago, I introduced what we called the Staple Act. I'd heard many, many times from businesses that we ought to staple a green card to the diploma of anyone who receives a graduate degree, particularly a PhD in the so-called STEM fields. This legislation accomplishes much of that by simply saying that those who are here, educated in our U.S. universities, we'll allow to stay here, those with a master's degree or a PhD in the STEM fields, and help create jobs. A big percentage of the jobs created and Fortune 500 companies that are listed were started or created by foreigners, those who were here, who received an education here and were allowed to stay, or by first or second generation immigrants. We need to make sure that those who are going to help us build our economy are allowed to stay, and this legislation does that. We all know that the status quo is unworkable. If you run a business in this country, you are not given currently adequate tools to determine whether those who are presenting themselves for work are here legally or not. This legislation will make sure that those tools are there. I look forward to this process. I look forward to the debate. I think that this debate can represent the Senate at its best, where we can consider this legislation, consider amendments to make sure that the bill is improved, and then send the bill on to the House that can be considered there as well. I want to commend those who've been involved in this process. The so-called Gang of 8 members, my colleagues, the other 7, worked long and hard on this. Our staff worked well into the night, weeks on end, to make sure that we have the legislation before us today. This has been a long, thorough, good process. As I mentioned before, those who have seen the Congress, the House, and the Senate in recent years maybe not reach its full potential, to put it mildly, ought to be heartened by the process on this legislation. And I hope that we can continue it. I look forward to debating it with my colleagues.